There is a strange kind of loneliness in being the calmest person in the room and still being the one everyone keeps their distance from. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't do anything. And somehow that was the problem. If this already feels familiar, like this video and subscribe. This channel is for people whose calm gets misread, and the next signs may finally explain why. There is a reason this keeps happening to you, and it is not because something is wrong with you. Most people are constantly performing small signals to feel safe around each other. A smile here, a nervous laugh there, a quick sorry just to soften a moment. This is how most people move through the world. But some people don't run on that setting. They stay steady, they stay quiet. And because that steadiness is rare, it often gets misunderstood. Psychology suggests that people read each other in seconds, long before any real conversation happens. In that short window, a calm presence without the usual social signals can feel unclear to someone else's nervous system. Not because you did anything wrong, but because you simply didn't perform the way they expected. Here are 9 quiet signs that this has been happening to you for longer than you realized. Sign 1. Your face never learned to beg for safety. When you are simply thinking or not performing anything for the people around you, your face settles into something plain and still, not angry, not upset, just neutral, just resting. Most people don't even notice they're doing this constantly. But if you watch closely, you'll see it everywhere. Someone walks past a stranger and smiles a little, even though nothing is funny. Someone answers a simple question and adds a small laugh at the end, almost like an apology for existing in that moment. It's automatic. It's a small offering that says, I'm friendly. I'm no threat. Please don't be uneasy around me. You may not do that. Your face rests the way it rests, without asking anyone's permission first, without checking whether it needs to soften itself for the people nearby. If you're deep in thought, you look like you're deep in thought. If you're simply listening, you look like you're simply listening. There's no performance layered on top of it. To someone watching from the outside, this can look like judgment, distance, or even mild disapproval. Someone might glance at you and think, did I do something wrong? Simply because your face wasn't offering the reassurance they're used to receiving from most people. But nothing about it is cold. Nothing about it is meant to signal anything at all. It is simply a face that isn't working overtime to make other people comfortable. It's not doing anything to anyone. It's not hiding disapproval or secretly judging the room. It is simply not adding an extra layer of performance on top of who you already are in that moment. And because most people are so used to that constant layer of reassurance from others, its absence in you feels loud, even though you never intended it to say anything at all. Sign 2. Your silence fills the room more than words do. Most people feel a pause in conversation as pressure. The second, a gap opens up. Something in them tightens, like an alarm quietly going off that says, this needs to be fixed right now. So they rush to fill it, sometimes with useful words, sometimes with filler, sometimes with things they didn't even plan to say, just to make the silence go away. You don't feel that same pressure. A quiet moment doesn't unsettle you. You can sit inside it comfortably without needing to patch it with noise. To you, silence is simply silence. It's not empty, it's not awkward, it's just a pause where nothing needs to be said yet. The problem is, other people are not used to that. When you don't rush to fill the silence the way they would, they start to wonder what's happening behind your eyes. Are you upset? Are you judging them? Are you bored? Their mind doesn't like an unanswered question, so it writes its own answer. And that answer is usually far more serious than whatever is actually happening in your mind at that moment. Maybe you were simply thinking about something unrelated. Maybe you were just enjoying the quiet. Maybe you were fully present and didn't feel any need to narrate that presence out loud. But because the silence didn't come with an explanation attached, they build their own story around it. Your calm gets turned into their narrative. And you rarely even find out it happened because nobody tells you what they assumed. They just quietly keep a small distance from that moment onward without knowing exactly why. Sign 3. Your words arrive without a cushion. When you know what you think, you tend to just say it. You don't wrap it in extra padding like maybe, or I could be wrong, but, or this might sound weird, but. You simply say the thing, plainly, the way it exists in your mind. This usually comes from being sure of what you're saying, not from wanting to sound blunt or superior. It's not a performance of confidence. It's just that when something is clear to you, you don't feel the need to dress it up in disclaimers before letting it out. To someone who isn't sure of themselves yet, or who is used to a much softer delivery from the people around them, that plainness can feel unexpected, almost too direct, even a little sharp, even when your tone was calm and your intention was simple honesty. They are used to people softening their words constantly, wrapping every opinion in a few extra layers, just to seem easier to talk to, less threatening to disagree with. When you skip that softening, it isn't because you don't care how it lands on the other person. It's simply because you speak the way you think, without extra padding wrapped around it. The words arrive exactly as they existed in your mind. And for someone used to receiving everything pre-cushioned, that directness can feel like more weight than you ever intended to put behind it. Sign 4. You don't check the room after you speak. Watch people closely in almost any conversation, and you notice something small but constant. After they say something, their eyes flick, just for a second, toward the other person's face. Did that land okay? Did I say too much? Was that the right thing to say? It's an automatic little check. So fast, most people don't even realize they're doing it. You may not do this at all. You say what you mean, and then you simply move on without circling back to check whether it was approved of. This isn't because you don't care about the people you're speaking to, it's because your sense of whether something was worth saying doesn't depend on watching their reaction to confirm it. You already know what you meant, and you trust that. To someone who is used to that quick approval check from almost everyone else, your lack of it feels unusual, maybe even slightly cold. They read your steadiness as distance, as though you don't care how your words landed, when really it's simply a mind that doesn't need a stamp of approval to feel settled in what it already said. Sometimes this even makes people slightly nervous around you because they're used to a constant back and forth of reassurance. Was that okay? Followed by, yes, that's fine, repeated quietly throughout a conversation. When you don't ask for that reassurance, some part of them assumes you don't need their approval at all. And that can feel unfamiliar, even intimidating. Though nothing about your intention was ever about power or control. Sign 5. Your eyes don't look away first. Most eye contact between people works like a quiet, unspoken exchange. One person looks, the other looks back, and after a moment, someone looks away first, almost like a small signal that says, we're both okay here. Neither of us is a threat. It happens so quickly that nobody consciously thinks about it, but it happens almost every single time two people make eye contact. If you tend to hold that eye contact a little longer than expected, not staring, not intense on purpose, just steady, it can feel different to the other person before they even understand why. Their mind notices the pattern breaking. It expects the usual quick glance away. And when that doesn't happen, for a brief second, it reads as something more intense than you ever meant it to be. From your side, you are simply present. Maybe you're just listening closely. Maybe you're genuinely interested in what they're saying. Maybe your mind hasn't even registered that you're supposed to look away first. But to someone whose nervous system is expecting that usual back and forth glance, that steadiness can feel like something is being asked of them, some kind of challenge or demand, even though nothing about your intention was ever like that. It isn't a challenge, it's simply attention that doesn't rush. And in a world where most people's attention is constantly shifting, checking phones, glancing around a room, breaking eye contact quickly, that kind of steady attention can feel almost too much for someone who isn't used to being truly seen. Sign 6. Your standards show up before your words do. You don't have to say a plan isn't good enough for people to feel it. If you hold a certain level of care about how something should be done, it often shows in small, quiet ways. A longer pause before you answer. A question that goes a little deeper than expected. A quiet look that says you're still thinking it through. Even if you haven't said a single critical word, people pick up on this quickly, sometimes faster than they pick up on anything you actually say out loud. Something in the pause, in the pace of your response, in the way your eyes narrow slightly while you think, signals to them that you're evaluating something. And because they can feel that standard without hearing it explained in words, they often fill the gap with their own doubts and insecurities. They assume you're judging their effort. They assume you think what they did wasn't good enough. They assume disappointment where there might be none at all. Meanwhile, what's actually happening is much simpler. You were somewhere in your own thoughts, working through what you noticed, turning an idea over quietly in your mind, without any judgment attached to it at all. This is one of the quieter ways a calm presence gets misunderstood. Your standards were never loud. You never announced them. You never said, this needs to be better. But somehow, people still hear them in your pauses, in your questions, in the small stillness before you respond. Sign 7. You go quiet when something actually bothers you. Some people get louder when they are upset. Their words speed up, their voice rises, their hands move faster, and it becomes obvious to everyone in the room that something is wrong. There's no mistaking it. You may work in the opposite direction entirely. When something actually bothers you, you get quieter, fewer words, a flatter tone. Your sentences get shorter, not because you've checked out of the conversation, but because you're trying to hold everything steady instead of letting it spill out into the room uncontrolled. To someone watching from the outside, this can look like you've lost interest in the conversation, or worse, that you're upset with them directly and simply refusing to say so. Meanwhile, what is actually happening is the complete opposite of what it looks like. You are working hard, quietly, internally, to stay composed instead of making the moment bigger than it needs to be. You are managing something inside yourself carefully without letting it become a scene. This is one of the most misunderstood patterns there is because it works backwards from what most people expect. The moment you are most affected, the moment something has actually gotten to you, is often the exact moment you look the most unaffected to everyone else in the room. You're calm. In that moment is not the absence of feeling, it is the sound of you holding a great deal of feeling very carefully. Sign 8. People explain themselves to you without being asked. You ask someone a simple question, something small, nothing loaded behind it at all, and instead of a short answer, you get a full explanation in return. Reasons, context. Sometimes even a small, unnecessary apology tucked quietly into the middle of it, as if they need to justify something you never questioned. You weren't checking up on them, you weren't testing them, you were just curious, or making conversation, or simply asking something practical. But something about the way you listen, fully, without rushing them, without interrupting, without glancing at your phone halfway through, makes people feel like they are being reviewed, even when nothing about your face or your voice suggested that at all. This happens because most people are used to being half listened to. In most conversations, the other person is already thinking about their reply before you've even finished speaking. So when someone actually gives them their full, undivided attention, it can feel unfamiliar, almost like being under a light that's a little too bright, a little too focused, even if the intention behind it was simply respect. So they fill the space with more than what was needed, more explanation, more context, more reassurance, just to feel like they've covered themselves. Just in case your quiet attention was actually quiet judgment, it almost never was. It was simply you, listening the way you always listen, fully and without distraction. Sign 9. You sense a feeling before anyone names it. Before a person tells you they're upset, tired, or unsure, you may already sense it. A slight shift in their tone that most people would miss entirely. A pause that sits a little too long in the middle of a sentence. Something in the way they answered that didn't quite match the words they used. You notice these things without even trying to, almost automatically. The way some people notice colors or sounds more sharply than others. This kind of awareness isn't loud, and it isn't something you announce to anyone. You don't walk up and say, I can tell something's wrong. You simply carry that awareness quietly, and it changes how you move through a room, how you respond, how gently you choose your next words, even if nobody around you realizes why. You often already know what's happening emotionally before anyone has said a single word about it out loud, and that quiet awareness can feel unsettling to people who aren't used to being read that closely. Most people move through their day assuming their surface is all anyone sees. When someone senses what's underneath before they've said a word, it can feel exposing, even if nothing about your intention was ever to expose anyone. They don't always know why they feel slightly seen, slightly exposed around you. It usually isn't anything you did on purpose. It's simply that your attention noticed something before they were ready to show it. And that noticing, quiet as it is, carries more weight than you probably realize. You may not have needed someone to explain any of this to you before now. Maybe you felt it in 100 small moments, a conversation that went quiet after you spoke, a friend who seemed unusually careful around you, a room that shifted slightly when you walked in, without ever having the words to explain why. What you needed wasn't a diagnosis. What you needed was language for something you've likely felt your whole life, quietly and often alone, wondering if the problem was you. You're not cold, and you were never actually intimidating in the way people meant it when they used that word. What looked like distance was steadiness. What looked like judgment was simply attention. What looked like disinterest was often the deepest form of care you knew how to offer, without needing to perform it loudly. A calm presence doesn't perform itself into being understood quickly, and that has nothing to do with a flaw in you. It has to do with a mind that processes people and moments a little more carefully than most, a mind that doesn't need constant reassurance signals to feel steady in itself. If any of these nine signs felt like they were describing you, quietly and uncomfortably accurate, that recognition is worth sitting with for a moment, without rushing past it. It may explain more of your life than you expected a video like this to reach, more of your friendships, more of your work relationships, more of the small distances you never understood until now. If this video felt accurate, like it, subscribe, and tap the bell so you don't miss the next one. This channel is built for people whose calm has always spoken louder than they realized. And there is more here for anyone still making sense of why they get misread.